Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Newmeyer, film critic for WOR Radio. Let's have another huge round of applause, please, for the wonderful Wonderstruck. Such a special film. And now, please join me in welcoming screenwriter and author of the novel Brian Selznick and star Millicent Simmonds. Welcome, both of you, and congratulations on such a special movie on its opening weekend. So great to have you here.
Thank you.
Brian, there are so many levels to this beautiful film. There's interior levels, there's levels of story going on. Let's start out right at the very beginning and talk about the origins of it, how it became a book, and then how it became a Todd Haynes film.
Yeah, there were a couple of inspirations in the very beginning. I saw a documentary about deaf culture called Through Deaf Eyes that got me intrigued by the history of deaf culture and the deaf experience. It's where I learned that the coming of sound was considered a tragedy for the deaf community in 1927, which as a hearing person I had never thought about, because deaf people and hearing people were able to go to the movies together up until that point. And I had always loved museums and the Museum of Natural History and the Wolf Diorama. I had fallen in love with the panorama. And so it was a matter of trying to find a story that would bring all of those things that I love together. And then when the book was published in 2011, I had become friends with Sandy Powell, who designed the costumes for Hugo, which was adapted from another one of my books. And Sandy read Wonderstruck right after it was published, and the first thing she said to me was, "This should be a movie for Todd Haynes." And so she encouraged me to write a screenplay, which I've never written before, and when it was done, I gave it to Sandy, and Sandy gave it to Todd, and here we are tonight.
Including basking in the glow of such a beautiful movie, which, as you mentioned, the scene that I always just find so heartbreaking is when we see Millicent's face looking at the young Rose, looking at the marquee that says "Sound is coming soon," and it's all right there in her face. And let's give a huge round of applause, please, to Millicent Simmonds on her film debut.
Thank you very much.
And Millie, let's talk about your discovery of Rose in the book, because you were a fan of the book, obviously, before even the screenplay came around. What you thought about her, your discovery of Rose in the book, and what you wanted us to discover through your phenomenal performance.
I read the book when I was very young, in elementary school. I was in the library. I mean, I love to read it. I've always grown up reading. I always loved to read. But I was in the library. I wanted to read something different. I wanted something new. And I saw this huge book, tome, with the word Wonderstruck. And I thought, I am very interested. I never thought someone would use that word. I was intrigued by the word itself. So I pulled it off the shelf and read the book and was immediately mesmerized. I found the pictures. I loved the illustrations, and I loved telling the story through pictures. And especially with Ben, how Ben and Rose, how their narrative relates to each other, the journeys, both of their journeys. And I thought that both parts were equally important, and the deaf part was very important. And then I thought, well, who is this writer? And I found out that he was hearing, and I couldn't believe it. Brian Selznick is hearing, and he could write so well about the deaf experience. And I wondered what made him wonder about our culture and the journey of deaf people. And since I've met him, I've been asking him all about it, his journey, and I found it very interesting and loved the book.
Was there something special about Rose that you really wanted to convey to us? Because I feel like there's so many layers to her that's going on behind your eyes. As you were talking with Todd about the performance, was there something you thought, this is something I really want to convey to the audience?
Well, let me begin with the audition. When I found out that I got the part for Rose, they sent me a list of, silent films Todd sent me a list of silent films for me to watch, which was also interesting to understand the 1920s and silent films. One film that he sent was about Helen Keller, and I found it fascinating to see how she expressed herself, how emotions could be conveyed without words. And she didn't overdo it. And I saw that a lot in the silent films, that acting was so different, quieter. And Todd would always say, take your time, take your time. We'll wait for you. We're here for you. We're going to give you support. Wait till you find Rose. And Brian would tell me more about Rose, what Rose's experience was, and all of that helped me really understand who she was and become very comfortable with Rose's character. They gave me room to be who I am, to find her, and that was an amazing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much going on in here, Brian, in terms of as a Valentine to identity. It's about discovering yourself through new senses, and it's also a love story about New York and about the kind of the hidden corners of New York, as it were, including the West Sider books up on the Upper West Side, which has a special place in the story, not just in the film, right?
Yeah, I used to work at Eeyore's Books for Children, which is where I got my start. And because in college I didn't know I didn't want to do children's books, and after college I kind of came to my senses, and a friend suggested I get a job at Eeyore so I could learn about children's books, and West Sider at the time was called Griffin Books, and it was about a block up from Eeyore. So when I was writing Wonderstruck, I had a West Sider in mind, so I actually went there and I drew the interior of West Sider for the drawings in Wonderstruck, and then unbeknownst to that, the scouting, the location crew for the movie found West Sider Books, and so we actually filmed in the place that was the inspiration for the story, because I wanted the book to be a Valentine to New York and all the things I loved, and I thought setting this Valentine at one of New York's lowest moments, when New York was at its worst, would show that if you can fall in love with it, then you could fall in love with it at any point.
Yeah, that's on 80th and Broadway, by the way, if anybody wants to go there and buy a book, because definitely buy a book at West Sider Books.
Go to West Sider Books.
Let's also talk about the notion of the two eras, the 1920s and the 1970s, 1927, 1977, and how Todd talked to you about the disparity between these two eras and New York's place in those times, right?
Yeah, when I was writing the book, I set the first half in 1927 because that's when sound came, and that seemed like a good moment to, as you were saying, show a deaf character seeing the coming of sound and what that would mean. And then 50 is a nice round number narratively, and 50 years after 1927 happens to be 1977, when I was 12 years old. I'm the same age as Ben. And I grew up in New Jersey with parents who hated and loathed New York City, and so I was taught to fear it very, very deeply. And the blackout happened on my birthday, and I remember reading about it in the paper, and so so I wanted to set that moment and use that as part of the story.
Yeah, and narratively, like, I mean, because Todd has said, like, it's in the 20s, a lot of the camera shots are kind of looking up, right, at the buildings, and then in the 70s, it's a different perspective, right?
Yeah, because one of the things that was interesting to me was obviously contrasting these two time periods, but it really wasn't until I was sitting with Todd when he said yes, and we went through the script page by page, and so what he filmed was very much what I originally wrote, but there were a few little details that he wanted to weave in, a few other ideas, and it was very thrilling. It was incredible to sit with him. And he used that image where the 20s is about New York being built up, and the 70s is about New York coming down and coming apart. And I guess I knew that, but it wasn't until I heard Todd say it that I felt like I really understood what I was doing in the story. And I find that happens a lot of times where I'll do things instinctively, and then it's the readers or someone responding to it who then tells me what's in it that makes me see it in a new light.
Yeah, I love that he and cinematographer Ed Lockman, like, lots of low shots looking up, from Millie's point of view, looking up at the buildings, and then lots of shots looking down at sort of the garbage in the street in the 70s.
Yeah, Mark Friedberg, who designed that was the production designer, said that he grew up in the 70s. He actually wanted to become a production designer because of the dioramas at the Museum of Natural History. So there were a lot of personal connections for him. And he said that most of his crew was in their 20s, and they couldn't believe how dirty New York was. And he said most of the time he was just saying, no, more garbage. Like, there has to be more garbage. And there were people whose entire job was making period garbage. It's all period garbage, I want everyone to know. And putting it down on the set.
I love that. We're going to take some questions from the audience in just a moment. Millie, I want to talk to you about working with Julianne Moore. Let's have a huge round of applause for Julianne and for the rest of the cast as well. So special. And what a terrific job the two of you do, not only in your scenes together as mother and daughter, but also in kind of crafting one character of Rose and how she sort of watched your performance to craft her own performance as the elder Rose. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. She said she did. And she said she would watch the dailies to understand what young Rose would do, so she could then understand what the older Rose would do. When we would talk with her, we would write back and forth. She's left-handed, so I had to write left-handed, even though I'm not left-handed. That was difficult. It was a lot of fun to work with her. She signs so I love her signing, and we signed it together through the scenes when we weren't filming and talking. She's very compassionate. She's very she's a fascinating actress to work with and a great person.
Can I say one thing before we go to the Q&A? I just wanted to say that this is Millie's first movie that she's ever made.
Thank you.
She's from Utah. And we sent out a casting call. Laura Rosenthal, the casting director, had never cast deaf people before. And Todd and Laura were very committed to finding a deaf girl to play Rose. And so they sent out a casting call to places all around the country. And was it a teacher who told you about this audition?
Yes, my drama teacher.
Yes. And you had acted in plays in school?
Very small productions.
Yeah, and so we got about 200 audition videos of girls from around the country and actually from around the world. And when Todd and Laura were nice enough to share some of the audition videos with me, and when we saw Millie's video, we all cried because she was so beautiful and so proud of being deaf and proud of using sign language. And would you describe what you did in your video, the way that you made your audition video?
When I auditioned, they sent me a list of scenes, of course, to run through and to film. So I had to sit and look through a scrapbook with pictures of my mother and look sad. We got these sort of directions. I needed to go outside and walk outside and fall down, have an unexpected experience that makes me fall down, and the other part that they wanted to video was the part where I have to take the book from my father, and I'm upset about him wanting me to learn how to lip read and speak and tear out the pages. So some simple scenes, but we were in a rush. Mom and I wanted, Mom needed to go somewhere. I can't even remember where. So she was like, let's hurry up and do this. And she took her, the phone and just recorded it on the phone. And then people watched it and were crying. We couldn't believe it.
But we all feel like the fact that we found Millie is a miracle. And Todd and Laura were committed to finding the best actress for the part, not just a deaf actress, but the best actress. And so we all feel incredibly lucky that we found Millie.
Absolutely are.
Thank you so much, Brian. Love you.
If anybody has any questions, just shoot a hand up really high up because we've got lights right in our face, right here in the front, right here.
What was it like to have your amazing book turned into a movie?
It was really good.
And then a question.
I actually could say even more about that, because not only was it good, it was inspiring to me, and what's really thrilling is that I got to see my story through Todd Haynes' eyes. And I've been a fan of Todd's for a long time, and so that was really incredible. And you had another part that you wanted to ask?
And for Millie, well, I see you as a role model, and you are an amazing actress, and I really loved your part in the movie.
Oh, thank you so much. I really, thank you. It means a lot. I'm glad you liked it. I always wanted to show other people that anyone can do anything, even if you're disabled. So that your comment inspires me. Thank you very much.
A whole lot of hands. Let's go way to the back, the hand that's highest back there, yes.
Hi, first of all, Millie, a beautiful job you did in the film.
Thank you very much.
Second of all, this is a book and now a movie that has a deep resonance in our family's life. We took a little pilgrimage to the Queen's Museum today, which was very special. and I will embarrass my daughter terribly to say this, but about 4 years ago, actually more than that now, 5 years ago, there was a contest in Seattle where we lived about writing about your favorite book and your favorite author, and it was a statewide contest. I'm sure my daughter is just cringing here. And she ended up among thousands of people. She wrote about Wonderstruck and ended up going to the state capitol in Olympia and meeting the governor's wife. And if there's a time after this to say a quick hello, that would be appreciated.
What's your daughter's name?
Alana.
Hi, Alana. Let's talk
Hi.
afterwards, okay? I'll hang out for a little bit. We'll all meet outside.
That's
And then you can tell me how embarrassed you are by your dad. All right?
And then just a last thing. It's such a beautiful book of synchronicity and chance. And I just would like to say that coming here tonight, I remembered living in New York 30 years ago, and I said to my wife and daughter, just across the street, there used to be a sign written in a mural that said, "We're all of us in the gutter. Some of us are looking at the stars."
Really?
Yes, really. And I had stopped there. I remember years ago stopping there, and that's where I first saw the quote. I thought it was this amazing quote. And then we walk in, and of course it's the opening text, and I'm like, grab my wife's leg. So thank you for your beautiful book and the beautiful film, and the wild synchronicity of you being here tonight, both of you. Anyway, beautiful job.
Thank you very much.
There's something about the synchronicity of the story, like whether it's stories like that, or stories even like the West Side books that you just told Brian, or even like finding Millie and the casting of her, that sort of like seems to be ingrained in the DNA of the story in some ways, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that I find interesting is that very often my work is described as fantasy. Hugo is often described as fantasy. Wonderstruck is often described as fantasy. And there's actually nothing in either of those stories that couldn't actually happen in the real world. There's coincidences, but obviously coincidences happen, and extraordinary coincidences happen. And those types of coincidences, when they happen, make us feel connected to something larger. And I think that what you just described, Alana's dad, what you just described, is that sense that we're in the right place, we're doing the right thing for a moment. And to be reminded even for a moment that maybe we're part of something larger and we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, I think is an incredibly valuable thing. So whenever I see someone describe my work as fantasy, I'm happy, because I do want it to feel like that, even though it's all possible. And I think that's what I want that's what I do want to get across.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Hold up your hand, yes. Let's see, how about on the left-hand side right there? Yeah, we have the left-hand side.
I've read your book probably about 10 times, and it's amazing. But one thing I've always wondered about, like you writing and illustrating the book, is how long did it take you? Because the drawings are so intricate and so amazing.
Oh, thank you. It takes 3 years to make these books. I'm writing and working on the story the entire 3 years, but then there's usually a solid year
When I'm just doing the drawings that you see in the book, and that's after a year of sketches and research and travel. And and then for something like Wonderstruck, the stories were created simultaneously. So in Hugo, The Invention of Hugo Cabret, I actually wrote a version of that first, not knowing it was going to be partially illustrated. And then I went back, it was like a novella, it was like 90 pages. And then I went back and had this idea to try to tell part of the story like a silent movie. And so Hugo grew from 90 pages to 650. And it takes longer to say things in drawing sometimes. Picture isn't always worth 1,000 words. And so with Wonderstruck, I developed the two stories simultaneously, going back and forth, knowing that they were going to weave together. So for instance, in Ben's story, I knew I wanted to strike him with lightning because I had the title Wonderstruck before I had the plot. So I thought I needed to strike somebody with something. But I couldn't draw lightning in Ben's story because in the book, Ben's story is told in written language and Rose's story is told all in pictures to parallel the deaf experience, which is mostly a visual experience. And so if I wanted to draw lightning, I had to put lightning into Rose's story and have it happen about the same moment that Ben gets struck by lightning so that the two stories could resonate against each other. but I didn't want to just have Rose go to, go in a storm where there's lightning. So I thought, oh, maybe she goes to a movie theater and she sees a movie where there's lightning. But then I thought, well, why does she go to a movie theater? It's like, oh, maybe there's an actress who she really likes. And then after I came up with that, I thought, well, why does she like this actress so much? And that's when I thought, oh my God, it's her mother. But I came up with that because I wanted to draw lightning.
And the lightning that strikes, I think, is sort of inspiration in a lot of ways. And here it is right here. We have time for about like 2 more. Right here, there's a waving hand here on the left-hand side.
Hi, guys. Raul.
Hi, how are you? This is the gentleman who played Jamie's father. Hello.
What a coincidence to be here with you guys. Thank you. Millie,
You were fantastic.
you're amazing, like I tell you every day. And Brian, I just wanted you to share a story that you told us at the museum of why the wolves diorama. You told us, and then you told us how hard it is to actually shoot in the museum.
Yeah, the wolf diorama has been a favorite of mine since I was a kid. And when I was writing the book, I had mentioned that I was trying to put in things that I love most in the city. So I went back to the museum, looked at the wolf diorama, and I realized I had never actually read the card, about the wolf diorama. I was just always so entranced by the moonlight in the diorama. And so I actually read the card, and that's where I first saw Gunflint Lake. And I looked up Gunflint Lake, and it turned out it's this little tiny arts community filled with poets and artists and glassmakers. And I emailed the librarian in Gunflint Lake, and she knew some of my previous books, like The Invention of Hugo Cabret. She was like, why are you writing me in the middle of nowhere? And so my husband and I went to Gunflint Lake, and the librarian of Gunflint Lake gave us a tour of the area, which was really invaluable. And I put all of that information into the book. And then when we were filming at the museum was very, very helpful and very eager to bring us in and behind the scenes. And so we got to go behind the wolf diorama, where we saw little drawings that the people who installed it had done, little diagrams where they were trying to work out some measurements. And we got to actually, obviously we filmed in the real museum, and they even allowed us to put new lights in the wolf diorama because it was a little too dark to actually film the way it is. And so we were able to brighten it up a little bit, even though it looks still very dark and mysterious. It's a bit brighter than it is when you go visit it. And so, so it was a thrill for everybody to be able to be there with the real wolf diorama at the museum.
If there's any kids in the audience, only kids put your hands up. If there's a kid right here, okay. Let's do a kid right here for the last question. Yeah.
Hi. So you had a movie for The Invention of Hugo Cabret, and now for Wonderstruck. You think you're going to have one for the Marvels?
So The Marvels is the book I did after Wonderstruck, and I would love to have a movie. Do you know anybody? Are you a director? Do you want to direct it? All right, so I've got a director now for my new movie. And Millie, would you star in the new movie?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay.
Happy to.
I'm going to wrap up with just asking Millie a question, because you said that you just acted a little bit in school, not really that much. What was your experience like filming for the first time? Was it what you thought it was going to be, making a movie, and a movie this special?
I didn't have any expectations. I grew up wanting to be a cop or a fireman. I thought I wanted some dangerous job where I save people. I know it sounds silly, but that was sort of what I wanted to do. I never thought I'd be an actress. I never thought I'd be in a movie. It's a big deal. And really, I had just acted on stage. That was my experience, which is very different. It took a while to rehearse. You have, the same set. You have a live audience. So that experience is very different. You can't make any mistakes, or, if you do, you try to cover them up as quickly as possible so that the audience doesn't catch you. But it was fascinating, the difference from theater to film. It's huge. The sets are huge. The cameras are huge. People are watching you. There are a lot of people watching you, and it becomes a little bit, it feels a little weird. I got used to it. And it's amazing to see how the camera works. That was amazing. They're working hard to make sure that everything is framed right. And working with Todd, he's so organized and so precise. And you know, I always thought movies were so easy to make. I thought it was very simple. They would just have a camera, they'd set it up, and you know, there you go. But wow, you see, you know, it take days to go through one scene, and it's long, hard work for everyone. And I'm fascinated by that.
Well, this is such a special movie, and you are such a special part of it. Ladies and gentlemen, Millicent Simmonds, Brian Selznick. The movie is Wonderstruck. Thank you very
so
much.
much.